that they asked him to join this project, Stargate or whatever it was called. I can't remember now. And what happened was they gave him an encrypted email address. And they would email him, and if they sent him an email, sometimes they would get on the phone with him, and he couldn't tell us anything.
On this channel, we call out false prophets like the Bible tells us to. The Bible tells us these are wolves in sheep's clothing. And how do we know they are false? Jesus said the law and prophets were, until John the Baptist. If the thing does not come true, they are not of God. And through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. For false Christs and false prophets shall rise, and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to get into part 3 of Kim Clement and his daughter Don A. Bucktooth Petruska. Going to get into this Stargate program and how you heard her say it. He was part of it, and then after some bad stuff comes out, she tries to distance Kim from it, and doesn't work out so well. So let's get into this.
Project Stargate was a secret U.S. government program that investigated psychic phenomena, especially remote viewing. The claimed ability to perceive distant or unseen targets without the use of known human senses. Main focus: remote viewing. Remote viewing was the centerpiece of the Stargate program. Subjects were asked to visualize and describe locations, objects, or people from a distance, sometimes across the globe, with no prior knowledge of the targets. Remote viewing versus astral projection. Remote viewing: a mental process where a person attempts to gather information about a distant or unseen target using extrasensory perception, ESP used by CIA, DIA, U.S. Army intelligence, astral projection. The belief or experience of leaving one's physical body and traveling in a non-physical or astral form. Rooted in spiritual, mystical, and occult traditions, e.g. Theosophy, Eastern mysticism. Practiced by occultists, mystics, yogis, and New Age practitioners.
So I was looking at remote viewing and seeing how it lines up with the Bible, and it operates through ESP. It goes divination, clairvoyance, hidden knowledge apart from God. We got some key verses in Deuteronomy telling us to stay away from soothsayers, sorcerers, wizards, necromancers, and it's detestable to the Lord, and that we're supposed to consult God. We're not supposed to go through these things. But down there at the bottom, it's saying it was a government tool, but it says it seeks supernatural knowledge outside of God's ordained means. So if we look at astral projection, it is similar to the occultism and witchcraft. 2 Corinthians, and no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. And it goes on to say that it can open the door for spiritual deception and demonic influences. So by Bible standards, if we look at remote viewing and astral projection, they're forbidden. Now, I remember watching many interviews and investigations into this stuff, and they talked to the people involved, and they talked about seeing dark entities, guides, occulty type things. And it says many of the remote viewers began getting help from entities or guides who turned out to be bad over time. They experienced nightmares, hauntings, sleep paralysis, mental oppression. They had physical manifestations such as voices, dark presences, violent spiritual attacks. It goes on to talk about this MUFON guy, saying that most of these alien things is also from occult practices and from demonic oppression. But at the bottom, we see where government projects like Stargate eerily resemble spiritual mediumship. So in the Stargate program, the remote viewers see dark figures, entities, feel watched. Several remote viewers experience psychological breakdowns, paranoia, or fear. It said a few of them here were contacted or encountered non-human intelligence, which later is believed to be demonic in nature. Now they wrote books, they done programs, and they wrote about this stuff. And there was even one account of in the remote viewing room, people that weren't remote viewing saw this entity appear in the middle of them. Now it goes on to say this, and I'm going to include it in case people went down this road or have some problems. But freedom through Christ. Many former occult practitioners and remote viewers report complete freedom from torment after renouncing the practice, asking forgiveness in Jesus' name, seeking deliverance from spiritual oppression. And then it goes on with, if the Son sets you free, you're free indeed, and resist the devil and he will flee from you. But George, you're not given specifics. You're just given generalized encounters. So let's look at the people that were in this project, the guy that started this whole project, what they had to say about it.
Several well-known remote viewers, particularly those involved in the U.S. military's Stargate program, have publicly or privately described dark, disturbing, or potentially demonic encounters. While not all labeled their experiences as demonic, the spiritual nature, emotional trauma, and entity contact suggest involvement in what Christians would classify as demonic influence or deception. Here are the most notable individuals. Ingo Swann, father of remote viewing. Role: developed controlled remote viewing, CRV, protocols used by the CIA and US Army. Demonic entity. Claims: Swann wrote about encountering entities during remote viewing, including non-human intelligences and interdimensional beings. He described malevolent presences when viewing certain targets, especially alien or off-planet locations. In his book Penetration, he claims that there are extraterrestrial beings on the moon and that the government is aware. Christian interpretation: these beings fit the biblical model of principalities and powers, Ephesians 6:12. Demonic entities masquerading as aliens. Pat Price, former police officer, Stargate remote viewer role, one of the most accurate early viewers, worked with Ingo Swann at SRI. Entity claims: Price claimed to encounter non-human beings controlling human affairs from secret bases on Earth. He said they could manipulate minds and hide from human detection. Joseph McMonigal, Army remote viewer, NAM001. Role: one of the most prolific remote viewers, involved for over a decade. Dark experiences. While McMonigal does not describe demons directly, he recounts disturbing sessions where something didn't want to be viewed. He reported deep emotional trauma and energetic backlash from some targets. He avoided occult language, but other RV insiders claim he was disturbed by malevolent presences. Ed Doms, former Army intelligence, remote viewer role, known for the kill shot predictions and public interviews about military RV use. Entity encounters. Dames has openly warned that some locations cannot be safely viewed due to entities that retaliate. He has described dark energy, sinister forces, and dangerous spiritual interference. Later, life. His worldview reflects New Age beliefs, not biblical discernment, but the nature of what he describes aligns with demonic interference. What many remote viewers call non-human intelligences, ETs, or interdimensional beings, the Bible identifies as demonic spirits, fallen angels, or deceiving entities.
And there are also testimonies from the viewers that converted to Christianity and shared their deliverance stories.
Entities offering knowledge, power, or control. Common patterns, promises of special knowledge, spiritual advancement, or ascension. Offers to help improve psychic ability or remote viewing accuracy. Claims to be benevolent or part of a higher spiritual hierarchy. In some cases, entities demanded obedience or partnership in exchange for guidance. Example, Ingo Swann, father of remote viewing. In Penetration, Swann recounts experiences of non-human intelligences that were highly advanced and interested in cooperation, but seemed manipulative and secretive. He wrote about mental pressure and fear around contacting them.
So along with these offers came sleep paralysis, nightmares, poltergeist activity, suicidal thoughts, and mental torment. Your tax money at work.
The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils.
They asked him to join this project, Stargate. So they had him, this was under W. Bush, they had him on Project Stargate or something, where he was helping them. You know, they had psychics and different kinds of people, and he was one of the people. He had an encrypted email address that would call him.
So we have Donna Petrushka, who's Kim Clement's daughter, saying on 2 different occasions that he worked on the Stargate program. And this is important because of what we're going to get into a little bit later. But right here she is saying it twice, and let's go over what I dug up with the connections to the Stargate program. Okay, let's get into the weeds and tie Kim Clement to the Stargate program. So here we have in Los Angeles, there was a private loft rented by intelligence agency. We have that Kim Clement and Major Dave Morehouse, ex-Delta Force, ex-remote viewer, and who's also tied to Stargate. And just a quick web search here, we can see that he was high up in Intelligence Security Command, Defense and Intelligence Agencies, a recruiter, and he trained as a remote viewer in the top secret Stargate program. Also, it goes on to saying after he retired and everything, he gave courses on remote viewing. And going back to this, there was Anaya Blank with a DIA badge, 2 civilians, 1 confirmed later as a remote viewer for LAPD.
Morehouse told Clement the gift he was prophesying with was the same frequency Hop the Gate viewers slide on, and asked Clement to drop the next prophecy inside the window, not after it. Source, Prayer Journal, photographed.
Now, I do kind of find this interesting because it seems like they didn't believe he was a prophet either, because they said drop it within the window, not after it. To me, insinuating that you were calling stuff after it happened. So in 2008, Prophecy and Military Intuition Seminar, the Marriott Tyson Corner, VA. I wonder if that's near a military base. Anyway, there's a flyer exists online of Kim Clement being the keynote, and the headliner is Dr. Edwin May, civilian head of Stargate. In the question and answer section, he said that he could not confirm or deny being a spiritual collector. This was on a DVD set. So this was leaked in 2013, and it was supposed to have been former Stargate handlers' email, and one of them was KC. And it told him to keep dropping markers on the Iran timeline. Same protocol we used, blah, blah, blah. So this was an email sent to a KC to keep dropping these markers, which leads me to believe his prophecies on Iran that he would give on his program. And here we have a podcast with this Joseph guy who is remote viewer 001, the first guy, legendary remote viewer. He is saying that Kim Clement may have been on the very short list, but declines to expand more. And this here was a screenshot from Kim Clement Legacy, which was ran by one of his old staffers. And it says that Clement was sometime asked to hold events near certain Air Force bases at the same exact window that high priority launches were scheduled. Someone that is trying to keep Kim Clement relevant and somebody who used to be on his staff. Now, here in a lawsuit with DIA and the CIA, it was a deposition. I believe you have to be sworn in for those. But this witness testified that the Gate team used Kim Clement as one of those people. Now, there's a claim on this one because it was redacted, but someone making the claim was supposed to have known. But this was supposed to be in a quarterly report from Stargate listing 3 church prophets, 1 foreign, 2 domestic. And what they were saying was Kim Clement was one of those redacted names. Could not be confirmed from what this guy was saying.
We have his daughter, court document, witnesses, remote viewers, intel contractors, and a handful of his own staff saying he worked on the Stargate program.
I personally believe that false prophet Kim Clement worked with the government on probably different projects, maybe starting a Q thing back then. But anyway, I've said in the other videos about his daughter, Donna Petruska, trying to protect it, trying to hide all the videos, proving he's a false prophet, putting everything behind a paywall of which she's already sifted through, and trying to sell products on her website, trying to do all this stuff, trying to protect his legacy or her paycheck. But she is doing, I think, evil in promoting her dad as a prophet when he's clearly false. So this caused a problem when everybody found out what the Stargate program was doing, how the remote viewing was contacting entities and did not jive with the Bible. And see, the problem is she already done interviews saying he was part of this program. So her trying to protect everything came up with, it's really a different program. I just didn't get the terminology right. We're going to dig into this new project that I can't find existing, and what she said about it and who's involved, that's probably even worse than the first project.
He had told us the name of it, project, and I knew it was something with a star. That they asked him to join this project Stargate, or Project Stargate or something, where he was. But he really didn't talk about it often because he wasn't allowed to. It was a classified, everything was classified information, so he couldn't talk about it. He had an encrypted email, apparently. I never saw it. My mom knows. And then he had, I think they would call him too.
She says classified project, and we got some major issues with this because her way out of getting him out of the Stargate thing was for something that doesn't exist, not classified, and it's just terrible. But she caught a lot of flack because people read about all the demonic stuff of this remote viewing astral projection of Stargate. And videos were made at the time pointing out how bad this program was and that it didn't jive with the Bible. So she was catching heat for this. I mean, this was the OG of today's false prophets. All these false prophets today point to him, how great he was. So we can't have him associated with a project that's against the Bible.
To you for sharing this with me so that I could have a better understanding of not only what my dad was involved with, but what actually happened with Stargate and with what my dad was doing, which was not Stargate. It was called Project Morningstar.
After searching everything, the only thing I can find is this right here talking about Code Breakers, which is her program, her video I'm playing, giving cover. It also talks about Amanda Grace from another false prophet that does shows with her and does events with her in a blog. That's all that can be found on this, except for a video of one of her false prophet friends giving a speech about it. But George, if it's a still running top secret program, it could still be going on and be held in secret. Well, if it's top secret, you're not really allowed to talk about it. And the video she's going to give to explain all this away is from one of her type of people, false prophet type, talking about this project openly in a video.
Somebody sent me a video.
That sounds suspicious.
And it was this man, Dr. Crumb.
Dr. Crumb. NAR ties? Yes. Teaching of NAR stuff? Yes. Says that he's got words from God? Yes. Comments are turned off? Yes. I didn't spend a lot of time on this guy, but the videos that I did watch, it's storytelling. He gets up there to tell stories. He also has direct ties to Chuck Pierce, Dutch Sheets, Greg Hood.
I'm going to play it for you guys, just bits of it. And I just have it open on YouTube, so I'm going to stop and start it as we go. So Donna, it was Project Morningstar. It was not Stargate. And I am so relieved right now.
Why would you be so relieved?
And this week to have gotten this information, but it is also giving me an understanding of what we're dealing with spiritually. And that's why I want you to watch it. So let's go ahead and start the video. And then I'll stop if I feel I need to. And then I'm going to be watching your comments as well.
Restricted version. But what I've also done that wasn't posted in that bio is after the attack of 9/11, President George W. Bush did what every U.S. president can do during a time of crisis and national emergency. He signed an executive order for a special circumstance to bring people into government that had a special skill or knowledge specific to that emergency. Just happened to be I had a little of that because I have an expertise in Islam as a culture and religion. So the FBI Counterterrorism Division learned that I had lived in an Islamic nation. My wife and I raised our children in an Islamic nation.
So doing a little digging around about this government expert in Islamic nations, it said he lived in Nigeria, which is not an Islamic state, and he gives stories about where he visited Malaysia. So that makes him an expert in Islam somehow. And these footnotes you see, Strategic Ministries, that's from his own website. That's the only place it's listed.
And that I understood the culture and religion of Islam.
He's a government expert on Islamic nations, with the only thing found was what he put in his own website.
I came in on those 4 signatures to serve what I thought would be a 2-week little fun thing to do, and ended up 22 years later, I'm still doing that.
Now, trying to do some searches on this, on being an expert in Islamic nations, we find church event bios. Who's his? Saying that he's worked with the White House. And whenever you go to the Federal Advisory Committee roster, there's no information there. The only thing that claims it is his website, church flyers, or videos trying to promote him. So the government has nothing. The only person that's claiming this is him, his websites, or stuff promoting his speaking engagements.
I'm in on President George Bush's signature. It had to be authorized by the president, by the director of the CIA, who was George Tenet at the time, by the director of the FBI, who was, interestingly, Robert Mueller, and also by the Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft. I came in on those 4 signatures to serve what I thought would be a 2-week little fun thing to do, and ended up 22 years later, I'm still doing that.
So the government has nothing showing these signatures, appointments, or anything. And he's been doing it for 22 years by the time of this video. But the thing is, with government appointments and stuff like that, they have to be updated. You have to re-sign ever so often to these positions, of which there's no proof of at all. It says that he has this founder of Leadership International, which is ministry trained leaders across church, government, businesses. And this is not with the government, and this is information that's pulled from his website. Now, I looked for this Leadership International and even put his name with it. And there's no IRS forms. There's no website. The only thing they can refer to is church-hosted pages or event flyers trying to get people to come see him because he's supposed to be important. And it says on the same church flyer that's trying to promote him that he's worked with the White House across all these presidents, but yet no official filings found with the government. And he basically just goes to all these churches and tells stories. Not preaching, just tells stories. And what I'm seeing is no credibility whatsoever.
So I want to share with you about several things tonight, but the most important thing I feel like the Lord's given me is to give you a timeline of when darkness got its greatest advantage in America.
Now, I want to hold up here. He's talking about Project Stargate. I'm going to let that out now. It is the greatest foothold darkness has got in the United States. Remember that. It was that evil, that occultic, but that's when it was.
There was a moment when the enemy got a foothold and an advantage in America. And I'm going to tell you when it happened. Because if you understand where the enemy got his advantage and how it happened, then you have the equipment of knowledge and revelation to do something about it. So are you ready? Buckle up, Buttercup, because I'm going to tell you what you probably have never heard before. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Soviets had begun to deal with occultic practices called remote viewing and astral projection techniques. And they got so good at it that their operators, their agents, could literally astral project themselves from Moscow to Washington, D.C., and stand behind and overlook the shoulders of generals and read classified information, go back into their bodies and report word for word what they read to their superiors.
And let's get this out of the way now. It's going to come up later. The success rate, the CIA's assessment was 0%. Supporters, people that wanted this program, said it was only 15 to 20%, and it's a hit rate. So if they got part of the information right, and it was better than random guessing. Scientific, they said it was above chance.
This began to happen in the mid-50s all the way through the 60s. We became aware of a hemorrhaging of intelligence that was falling into the hands of the Soviets. Now, some were caught, some were arrested for espionage activity.
Now, he's talking about real, actual spies here. I mean, we arrest spies, they arrest spies, they meet and do an exchange. It happens throughout history. And if I was to dig into this, it was probably in the news, and that's how they were hemorrhaging information.
But a lot of this intelligence the Soviets were getting was coming through this supernatural occultic practice they were using against America. You know what we should have done? When we learned of this operation by the Soviets, we should have humbled ourselves before God, repented, and asked God to show us a righteous reaction and response to a satanic occultic program the Soviets were using against us.
See, that's what everybody was saying. This was satanic and occultic. And then she's saying that her dad was part of this and she needs cover. And here we are with a NAR storyteller that gets paid to go to different churches and events to give stories.
But you know what we did? We didn't do that. We should have done that. But instead, we did what the U.S. government often does. Whatever the Russians can do, we can do better. And so in the late 60s, we began the same countermeasure program to use against the Soviets under the code name Project Stargate. Project Stargate was a U.S. attempt to outdo the Soviets using astral projection remote viewing techniques for the purpose of intelligence gathering. Now, as I told you earlier, I'm not going to tell you anything classified. It's all declassified, and you can do a search on Project Stargate and read all about it.
Which is what he did.
And there's a lot on the internet about it. I'm going to tell you aspects of it that you won't find on the internet.
And I guess that's because he's a government expert?
Stargate ran under the program name Project Stargate and also ran under other program names called Project Grill Flame, Project Sunstreak, Project Looking Glass. But all of these programs were using satanic techniques by psychics that our government and your taxpayer dollars paid for.
So this is a storyteller going to go on about Stargate for a while, but that's not the point. I want to get to what he's going to say next.
I came to work November the 6th, 2001, after the attack of 9/11, and I'm in a briefing with a federal government agency. I won't mention it by name, but I'm in this briefing. It had nothing to do with Project Stargate, but I'd come to become...
Now, I really hate investigating these storytellers because there's so much bull they put into these stories. But he's saying that he's so important that he's in these government meetings with no proof and nothing with the government even showing a connection.
And I looked across the table and I said, did you ever hear of Project Stargate? And he kind of paused and he thought, was that where we hired the psychics to do the astral projection stuff? And I said, yeah. I said, do you understand the implications of that? That our government paid occultists to go into the spirit world to come in contact with demons. I said, that opened a massive gate over America. And he said, I think you're right. And I said, you know what we should have done? We should have found some credible prophetic voices, which there are some. And I said, I know some of them personally. I said, because in the Old Testament, when the king of Israel listened to the prophets, the nation remained safe from its regional enemies. I said, there are prophets today on the planet who can hear from God, and there is a national security application of the prophetic gift to keep America safe. But we blundered drastically by tapping into the wrong side of the spirit realm. And I said, I think it brought a curse on America. The guy agreed with me as a believer. 3 weeks later, I get a call from the same official. He says, can you come by the office? So I go up there, and I go into a room, a conference room, and he said, remember 3 weeks ago we were talking about the psychics, Project Stargate? And I said, yeah. He said, when you left the office 3 weeks ago, I couldn't stop thinking about that. And how that you said God used the prophets of the Old Testament to speak to the kings of Israel, that when the kings listened to the prophets, the nation remained blessed and safe. And he said, I even got on the phone and I talked up the chain of command all the way to Washington, D.C. And somebody up the chain of command, he never told me who it was, but it was at the Hoover building in D.C. He said, somebody found that to be fascinating, and they want you to head up an experimental program to show us what that would look like. I'm going, me? And he said, yeah, you, because you're the guy that told us what spiritual implications came about by our government engaging in this kind of occultic activity. So somebody up the chain of command wants you to head up the pilot experimental program. You can call it whatever you want, but those prophets that you say you know, you can recruit them onto a team, and here's what we'll do. We will give your team some hard intelligence, natural information, and we'll ask your team to go to the Lord in prayer and get intel from God to fill in the blanks. In other words, to accomplish what the old Project Stargate tried to accomplish, but with righteousness instead of evil. And I walk out of that building that day and I'm going, wow. Now what do? First thing I did, I called Jim Hodges, my spiritual father, and said, Brother Jim, I need help bad.
This project was going to be called Project Morning Star, but this is a story. This is the only place it's found. It's not listed with the government. There's no searches you can do and come up with information except for this video. And if it was top secret, why is he calling up his friend and blabbing about it?
First of all, tell me who the credible prophetic voices are. This was way back in 2002, right? And so we got Chuck on the team. We got Dutch on the team. Rick Joyner came on the team. Paul Kane came on the team. Kim Clement served on the team. We had about 25 or 30 real credible prophetic voices. Got some of Bill Hammond's. You mentioned Tom and Jane Hammond.
See, she needed a way out. And here's this video that was done a little bit before she put it on here, giving her a way out. There's no information on this project anywhere. The ones that he listed of prophetic voices are some of the worst false prophets out there. So that's just as bad if this was a real thing, but it's not. There's nothing linking anything together here. The only thing that exists is this video saying it. And if it's supposed to be top secret, why is he blabbing about it? And we've already seen there's some suspicious stuff in his past.
We got some of their folks from Christian International down in Florida to serve on the team. What we tried to do was get a representation of all the prophetic streams, not all from one stream, but we got the Chuck Pierce stream, Glory of Zion. We got the IHOP, out of Kansas City. Got
people from IHOP KC. NAR all through and through, false prophets, scandals. That's who they were looking for. So the story
some
goes.
of those guys on the team. We tried to gather, and we ended up with a team of about 30. Some were known, but others were not known at all.
The only unknown prophet I know was found out to be, this guy.
Unknown prophet Fred Watkins coming on with a word from the Father.
But yet they heard from the Lord. And so we started operating what we called Project Morning Star.
And the only thing that can be found about Project Morning Star is this video. Nothing else.
Originally. It went through program change names. We ran it Project Morning Star, then we went to Project Swift Justice, Project, John, help me out. What were some of the other program names? Project Rolling Thunder, and the latest is Project White Stone.
So this can't be a top secret thing. This guy is supposed to be head of the project. He's out here talking about it. he's given all these names that come up empty whenever you search for them. Nothing. But if it's top secret, he can't be talking about it because he would have not been able to. The only place this exists is him talking about it.
So our team operated under those 4 program names.
And then later on, he's talking about telling this guy named Jim in a Starbucks about this new program. So it wasn't secret. Nothing can be found on this except for this video that she's referring to that was made months before her program here.
I am so relieved that my dad was a part of the God's counter to that. And he was, and although I don't know the details of what my dad was doing, I know that he worked under the very project that this man is talking about.
Donna, where's your proof on that? The only thing I'm getting is somebody that hangs out with people that lie in God's name, telling a story months before you have this program. None of it makes sense. Nothing can be found on it. But yet, on the other side of the scale, we can see there's some stuff there. And people talk about how church attendance is low. If I went to a church that put on this type of stuff, yeah, I wouldn't be going to that church anymore.
So they had him, this was under W. Bush, they had him on Project Stargate or something where he was helping them. They had psychics, and different kinds of people. And he was one of the people. He had an encrypted email address that would call him.
She said he was with psychics, didn't say anything about prophets, false prophets. So we got this where it was shut down in 1995, but we have the viewers and trainers of this program in Stargate saying that it continued as classified and put in smaller groups. Ed Dames says that work continues with intelligence and defense circles. Then we have them implying that there's military-linked organizations still are doing this. And there's still work on the Stargate program. So did she lie about Project Stargate, trying to make her dad more than what he was in these interviews? Or did she have direct knowledge of it? And we saw at the beginning of the video how there's some evidence saying he was part of it. Either way, this excuse of Morningstar doesn't work at all, and the guy's not credible. And let's go on a limb and say there was this project, or a still going project, Morningstar. It is filled with false prophets. Nothing good can come of that. If you see these teeth, run. That's the video, folks. Thanks for stopping by. Everybody, have a great day.
Like prophecies going out to the
Brother, this guy stinks!
What actually happened was this, and
Ah!